your hand up first.
Yeah, I got two questions. So originally, your relationship is with the developer.
Mm-hmm.
And when the developer left town and left us to our own devices, we were referring to the HOA CCNRs, we got rid of everything related to the developer, including that, which is, as I believe, as it should be. However, there is more development to be done by Carso Group. That's a fairly substantial amount possible. Homex, who knows? Not as substantial as it would have been if they hadn't had a problem. But so what the question really on that one question has to do with conversations with the Ocean Foundation and continuing the Fonator mandated requirement with whatever they're going to be doing in the future. That would be the ongoing thing.
Right. So I have opened conversations with Homex and with Grupo Carso. I don't know, I had multiple conversations with Homex and then it came to a dead stop.
As did most of those.
Right, exactly. Grupo Carso has been a little bit more encouraging. We have a very good partnership relationship with Carlos Slim's foundation. And so I'm working directly with the executive director of that foundation to help talk to the right people and get the right conversation going. When everything fell down here, I also spoke with the Homeowners Association and offered both to continue working with the Homeowners Association and that sort of thing. I'm open. If the Homeowners Association would like to work with us, I can put all of this back in place. If the Homex or Grupo Carso want to do it, we're in the master development agreement, so they're supposed to. But we'll see. We have no way of guaranteeing any of this stuff.
Well, you mentioned earlier the fact with the Homeowners Association, it's really our fideicomisos that have this provision in it. The question then again is, who's going to enforce that?
Right.
It's not really the Homeowners Association's responsibility to do that. In theory, it's the notarios and whatever, right?
Yeah, the notario, if you sell your home here,
Right.
and the notario looks at your fideicomiso, they're supposed to put a line item in there for the foundation. I don't think they're doing it.
Right.
And if they are,
yeah.
I don't know where the money's going. But it's not
I had a second question.
Okay.
And I was under the impression or understanding that you were involved in the creation of Agua Viva. And by the way, we in Agua Viva also paid the 1%.
Yes, you did.
So my understanding of the one of the main objectives of the Agua Viva development was to create a tourist attraction. And so you have, is that correct?
Yeah, I think that was
The marina.
a piece of it with the sort of, almost canals like Venice and being able to kayak in them and all these sorts of things. Yeah, I mean, I think that was, Ari, who was the architect, the team of us who were invited to Charette's to opine about what we thought things looked like and what the opportunities were. Yes, I mean, I think there was a set of goals here around the water features, the tourism piece, and all those sorts of things.
It all had to work together.
Yeah.
Right. And so the concern here, again, is just assuming, hopefully that you will somehow get, in contact with the right people in Carso and explain the whole concept and get them on board, is that when Homex came by, along, and the other half of Agua Viva, they basically said, no, we're not going to do any of this stuff through the water. Continue the rest of that stuff to make it into the viable. There's a lot of difficult issues related to that. But in order to make that happen, if it ever is going to happen, we really need Carso, those guys to get on.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, again, if I play the role that I played of observer and advisor, I will lean on them if they will take me to give them advice. Whether they listen to it or not, we all know what that, our advice is as good as it's printed on. There were, tremendous difficulties built into the vision for Agua Viva, right? You play with water, you play with plumbing of water, you've made your life that much more difficult, and I wasn't surprised when Homex, which was not experienced in this kind of a difficult, special design, abandoned it. I talked to them about it, and a handful of the senior people understood and got it and were interested, but I didn't quite succeed. but I'm not giving up trying.
Okay.
Others, yes?
Does anything that you've addressed here have to do with Loretto's designation as a Pueblo Magico?
Yes, so we worked with that as well.
Can you speak about that just a little?
Sure. So Mexico passed a set of incentive structures for communities that particularly had historical landmarks and history to be named as Pueblo Mágicos. And so we helped fund some of the original sort of documentation of the history of the mission in downtown Loretto, Old Town Loretto, on all of those kinds of things. And the intent is to raise the profile of some of those kinds of communities for the purposes of tourism, but also protect them. It's almost, I don't know if you've ever heard of the UNESCO World Heritage program, right? It's to designate things as special historical, cultural icon places, and Mexico chose to do it on its own level. And so Oaxaca and a handful of other places have this designation, and getting it for Loretto was really exciting.
So when you say protection, what can you expand on that?
So the idea would be that if you have particular buildings like the old mission and other structures, the wall that goes behind the mission, etc., that you try and preserve those, you prioritize preserving them, prioritize restoring them. I think an example might be if the clock tower on top of the mission is this iconic thing, you would basically design so that you didn't build high-rise things that block that view.
But nothing like, tourism can't overrun and destroy our oceans, nothing like that kind of.
The Pueblo Mágico, no, does not address natural resources harm per se. It's more designed around cultural heritage.
Thank you.
The national park, however, is the tool we can use to work very hard to hold the government's feet to the fire to prevent it from being overrun. The statute, and I know that Equal Aliens and some of the other groups are trying to expand the boundaries of the park someday, and I think that would be really desirable to the north and some of the pockets that were left out of the outline of the park that, if you look at a map, they don't make any sense.
I just saw a movie the other night called Mission Blue about the oceans. You're probably familiar with it. And how sad it is what's happening under the sea, which we don't even see. But they did speak about a few places in the world that are either restoring or maintaining their world under the sea. One of them that they talked about was Cabo Polo. And they didn't mention Loretto, but I go out and snorkel a lot, and my husband scuba dives, and it seems like we still are fairly rich with sea life. Can you talk anything about things that might be being done by your foundation to, continue the vibrancy of our marine park and the stretch of Baja Sur?
So, separate and apart from the Loretto Bay Foundation, the Ocean Foundation obviously works on these issues universally. We have projects and grantees all over the world. The Cabo Pomo example, we funded the ecological assessment that turned back the last resort development proposal at that site. Packard Foundation, the Ocean Foundation went together and funded some University of California studies to show how important the land resources were to the Cabo Pomo National Park and coral reefs, and that therefore a different plan was needed. So we are continuing to be involved throughout the Sea of Cortez. We belong to a funders collaborative which focuses on the national parks, the islands, fisheries, the Cabo Pomo Reef, also does some land conservation purchases, so there's some work, and I think you've got a poster outside that Ni Paraha is going to be here. They've been working with funding from these foundations to acquire land between here and La Paz to create a corridor for migratory species and protect some of the land. So we're involved as much as we possibly can be in all these things. Smart Fish, I mentioned, is working in Mag Bay, La Paz. We have, I think, 6 or 7 sea turtle research projects. Those are mostly on the other side of the peninsula. We've worked on shark fishing, also.
The sea turtle monitoring was started by the Lord.
Yeah, the sea turtle monitoring that happened on this side of the peninsula, which it hadn't been done before, was funded first by the Loretto Bay Foundation.
So then, if I'm understanding you correctly, I mean, because to me, what is going to keep Loretto alive and more tourists coming back to support it is when they come here and they're blown away by not only the magic of the mountains, but the magic of what's under the sea. And it's so critical to have Bamasur stay alive, unlike places in the Caribbean that have died. But along with that is the whole thing up north with the mines that are happening, which, you know, we as Americans have no way of being actively involved in any of the decisions that are being made in Loretto. But is that something that your organizations can give some counsel on, you know, in terms of the long views of the damage that it could, how it could kill the area?
This is a great example. I've had one staff working full-time for the last few months researching all the different mining claims, the ownership of the mining companies, the mapping of the plots that they have their claims on, the legal disputes regarding some of those claims, trying to understand which ones are solid, which ones are challengeable. Also looking at the legal structure, because the municipality of Loretto, which remember is huge, it's a county size, and includes all of that land, has an ordinance against mining, right? That was passed primarily to protect water resources in this region. And so these tremendous investments in acquiring mining claims and doing test drilling and various other things seem to go directly against the law on the books. So where do these folks get off thinking they're going to do this? And how can we use, again, the rule of law to stop them? And so we're spending some of our resources looking at this issue, understanding this issue, and understanding the legal pieces of it in order to be prepared for what looks like maybe a fight over the enforcement of the ordinance that's in place for the entire municipality. Yeah.
But is it true that the national government is the entity that sells the rights to whatever's under the ground?
Yes, but this is, the Mexican government is almost like a benign dictatorship sometimes. I mean, the executive power of the president and the administration is very hard to turn back, right? But I was involved in a campaign to turn back the federal government's plans to put a salt making facility in Laguna San Ignacio. The work we've done in Cabo Como, we turned back presidential decree. In both cases, it can be done, and I think the municipality already being on record that it doesn't want this. That's not the future that this community wants for this place. And I think this is an opportunity that all of you actually do have, is to, register your views as well, right? The mayor, the president of the municipality, would probably appreciate knowing that even though you can't vote and even though you aren't involved in this fight per se, that's not your view of the future either.
And what vehicle, how do we get that across without sounding like, we come down here and we want to pontificate? Yeah.
I think these questions are fantastic, thank you.
Why don't you tell them who you are?
Oh, sorry. We're walking in the door. Some of you told me, oh, you took me hiking onto David Canyon or Kumarawa. So hello again. And I think some of us, we've seen each other on Facebook, so now we're seeing each other finally in person. I'm obviously an admirer of what you've done. I used to work for Loretto Bay, and I was honored to have as a mentor Mark Spalding, and so many of you that inspired me to keep doing what I'm doing now. I'm a sociologist, so I'm obviously going into things that have to do with the environment. I was turned on by you. As I'm hearing you all speak, and in this little piece, like what do we do about this, if we like to call it a monster, like where do you come from, how do you do? I took a step back and I started thinking how we became what we were, like having these ideas of passing an ecological ordinance, El Pueblo Mágico, this development, just the idea of working together, being from different countries. And I went back and I started thinking, but Mark actually helped out the Provea, the environmental education program that helped to create the first curricula for environmental education for the whole state of Baja California Sur. We're the only state in the whole Republic of Mexico that you must teach environmental education in the schools. And it was started by you when you gave $25,000 to Doretta Winkleman from the Natural History Museum in San Diego. So we started planting the seed of doing things for the environment a long time ago. Now there's a beautiful gentleman back here. It's Tony Verdugo, te voy a presentar, right back there. Tony Verdugo actually used to be the head of fisheries in Loreto, back when then he became municipal president, and now he is truly our ally inside of the City Council of Loreto. So when we started hearing these stories about mining, and a lot of you actually came back with great information, like Linda Q, where are you? And she put on the web fantastic about the things that were coming out from this Australian company, mining company, I think it was, there, and what have you. People started asking questions. Rather than in the rest of Mexico, people never ask questions. You just go, I guess it's the way you do business down here, right? It's just the way things are done. And no one asks, no one cares. It just, I don't live here, I don't speak Spanish, I might as well just go with the flow. People started asking questions. People started saying, why is this going on? Why isn't someone saying something about it? And then people started sending emails. And those emails were from potential buyers of homes in Loreto that would have a concession on top of their home. And those emails, because someone cared, obviously I was not buying land, and probably you guys weren't, but someone did care. Someone threw them in the right direction. And those emails started getting to our city council members. And before all that, not only in Fonatur, but also through Laura Bay and your questions, and the people from Loreto and the expats that were already here, were starting to ask, well, how should we be developing our coastline? Because we've already seen how Cabo was developing. And then we had the Sherwood designs come across. And those were implanted with a lawyer in the state of Mexico, in the state of Baja California Sur with the governor there, of how we should be designing the coastline. And then we spend a lot of time with the local biologists and the local city council in educating them about why we should have an ecological ordinance. This was in 2004. We're in 2014. The last 2 years were decisive in passing the ecological ordinance. The only safeguard towards saying something towards mining companies, you shall not pass. And it was started back in 2004. At the same time in which you all started looking in this direction. So we were able to pass it with not a single petition being signed, not a single demonstration being done. Yet in Cabo, we had to have 25,000 people make a big SOS on the beach and sign petitions and what have you and make multiple of demonstrations. We didn't do anything up here. How did we do that? How is that even possible? And the only thing I come back with is because environmental education, caring, having meetings, raising awareness gets results. It really does. These small little initiatives actually go a long way. So yes, Mexico has a lot of things we can't control, and they're so abstract, like the land underneath where I don't own it. How is that possible? But it's true. Yet what do we do in order to get around that? What we're doing right here. We care. And we get rolling with things. And we pass an ecological ordinance, and now we're the only county in all of the state of Baja California Sur that has one. La Paz doesn't have one, Los Cabos doesn't have one, Mulegé doesn't have one, Constitucion doesn't have one. We're the only one do. And it is because not only you are here, Tony Verdugo is here, the people from town are here, our educators are here, because we actually care. So that's the answer, caring. Doing something about it, seeing and having people see that we're doing things. The fact that Mary Austin Stevens will share this beautiful list of all the groups you are supporting, these 17 different projects in the community, that's true empowerment of the community of Loreto, saying that if we work together, we get things done. We don't even know exactly how they're going to be and everything, but we get things done. And that is the reason how you get around mining, which is kind of like the hopeless list being put into play, though. There's nothing else. Okay, let's do mining. I hope that helps.
Yes,
I
thank
think,
you.
I had the good fortune of hiring Ceci away from the Loreto Bay Company to work for the foundation for a while. You know, one of the things that we will do with our project is try and get the legal information as clear as we can and the land claims as clear as we can, and the rumors shut down, because there's some things that are rumor and some things that are real. And that's always the hard part in any place to settle on. And that will give us all more tools if you have facts and law to work with. When Founders and the first part of Agua Viva were built, we worked with the developer, with Fonatur, everyone, to try and manage these things. And Ceci actually ensured that there was a recycling program so that the construction waste that was recyclable got packaged, trucked out of here, and recycled in some fashion. And that was when we had cooperation, right? If there is no cooperation and they're not listening, then one of the best successful things to do is shame, right? If there are photos of the trash behind the tennis courts next to the ramp on the Loreto Village Voice or other forms of media on a regular basis, and they're embarrassed, I think that becomes a piece of this. I also recommend that you talk with the folks at Eco Alianza who are working on, you know, solid waste management in this municipality. You're part of that same municipality, and they're already talking to the municipal authorities, right? Getting cooperation with them, and then doing some of these own things of your own to, you know, draw attention. You don't have to be heavy-handed or rude about it, but, you know, really draw attention to the fact that this is happening if you're not getting any cooperation or conversation going. I believe, yeah.
We have a bit of a problem here because TSD is associated with this development, of course, and there's a sense by a lot of people here that they use the term sustainability rather cynically as a marketing tool. I mean, they're still doing it today. They've got a development up in so, you know, how can you continue to go forward and sell this concept of sustainability, which, you know, to some extent is a little bit kind of fuzzy, but you have to be aware that it does have a bad name in this community.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, yes, of course. The question was, you know, TSD, who were the original Canadian developers, you know, used the phrase sustainability cynically, didn't, you know, fulfill the concept. And the concept itself is pretty fuzzy as it is anyway, right? And therefore, how can I continue to stand behind the word sustainability? You know, if I look at Founders in the first half of Agua Viva and I compare it to Los Cabos, I know what it looks like to see Los Cabos developed that way. There was a municipal development plan for Los Cabos that included marinas, a green space, a walkable Malecon, and then the first few blocks were single-story, then two-story, then four-story, almost like a Greek island hillside. That isn't what happened. No one enforced the development plan that was brilliantly drawn up by, you know, well-educated urban planners, right? And so this place may not be the most sustainable place on the planet. Many of the promises that TSD made to us as a foundation in order to get our cooperation weren't fulfilled, may not have been real. We didn't always get paid, as one colleague pointed out. You know, would I trust the people behind TSD if they asked me to come and do another deal with them? Probably not. But do I believe that this kind of arrangement in which, if there's going to be a development, part of the proceeds of that development goes to spend money to protect the community and the natural resources? Yes, and I'm trying to replicate that with people I believe in and I can trust. Words like green, new, sustainable, new and improved are abused by marketeers all the time. And they're not, you have to spend your own time and energy to figure out whether they're real or not, right? And I felt when I first got involved in this project, more than 10 years ago, that it felt real. The drawings, the scale, the concepts that behind some of the pieces of this walkable community and et cetera seemed like sustainable things that could last, that could be very, very different and demonstrate how tourism could be done well instead of high-rise self-destruct tourism like we have in Los Cabos. It didn't all work out. And they were not good businessmen. And they left everybody holding the bag, including us.
And there was a worldwide financial crisis.
And there was a worldwide financial crisis as well. But I think they were in trouble before that.
They were.
I just want to say, yes, we were incredibly disappointed, and people lost money, and but the dream is not dead. We are the dream, and if we keep going back to blaming them and thinking you did this and look how screwed we are, then we'll never have the dream. It's in our power. We are the HOA. We are the people here who can move forth and do as much as we can with the dream. And so I just think that all the talking, all of a sudden, all we have to do is get back into that groove again, and everybody's going, oh yeah, they really screwed us. Enough already. I just hate hearing this stuff because we are here and we're happy here, most of us. And if you're not, leave. We like it here, and we still have the dream, and we want there to be composting. We want this stuff to go on. We want to fight the mining. We want to relate to the town and be connected to it. And I just feel that it's time for us to stop hating those people who are not here anymore. Now they're gone. We're still here. So how are we going to stay here? Just whining the whole time about how we were screwed over? Really, as it's been said, no whining on the yacht. Don't give up the dream. I'm whining about the dream.
Hang on, there's a question back there. Start over again.
What part did monitor play in some of the issues that came to fruition, and what part will they play in the future of being able to help make this sustainable?
So Fonatur is an incredibly powerful agency. When Mexico discovered oil, it was very apparent very quickly that Mexico's oil was very low quality and not in large quantities, and that it would run out. And so someone somewhere was very smart and said, okay, what can we replace our oil industry with as soon as our oil runs out, or in parallel while we're developing our oil? And so they hired a Boston consulting firm who mapped out 43 years ago Los Cabos, Cancun, Loreto, all of these places that are Fonatur's properties. The government expropriated the properties. Fonatur, TSD didn't pick this place. Fonatur did. TSD didn't put the roads and the curves and et cetera in originally. Fonatur did. They were it's an agency designed as a speculator that gets these things started, foments tourism, and then gets out, right? Same thing with Puerto Escondido, right? They went in there and see the remnants of what they built and sort of left in order to encourage other investors to come in and build things. And it took them a very, very long time to get someone interested in Loreto, in Nopolo. So they were so happy that someone finally was willing to take this property that they were very cooperative at first, and there were a couple of folks in the office here who were, I think, very cooperative with the developer and the vision of being good to the environment and the scale and all these sort of things. They were willing to see an experiment done. I think they played a role in the financial failure of TSD. TSD did a lot of the things to themselves, but I think Fonatur also made getting the next tranche of land to keep going more and more difficult all the time. Tried to extract higher prices, even though the prices had theoretically been agreed to. So I think they were a very difficult player in some ways. I don't know the current head of the Fonatur office here anymore, but I think that it would be really interesting to sit down and meet with that person and understand what their view is for the future and where things are going.
Can I share 3 positive, good news of information that you guys all had something
Good
to do
news.
with? Yeah, it's always good to share, right? The things that were done in Loreto Bay Company and the Loreto Bay Foundation that had to do with conservation of the environment, from bats to reptiles to mangroves to cacti to the planning of Agua Viva, because the design of Agua Viva was meant to connect people to mangroves. And the piece of law that exists today in Mexico is meant to keep away people from mangroves in order to protect them. Those 4 types of work that were done with science and with local academia, we believe that next year we'll start to see some of the published work. The 2 of the academia people that were involved were Patti Galindo and Patti Cortez from La Paz. They were in part of CIBNOR, Centro Integral Biológico del Noroeste, the Northeast Biological Institute,
Yep.
and it belongs to the federal government, it's part of the Polytech. So hopefully, next year we'll be able to brag about that we're the only development that went down in an article with researchers as doing something for the environment. Now that's not other people that can say that, and we will be able to do that. And why are they doing that? Because no one else is doing it. So it's a big deal.
And that becomes something that you can go to Fonatur with and say, this was positive, peer-reviewed, academic published proof that this was a good idea, and let's keep doing more of it.
Yes. And another positive piece of information that I think is positive. I've never been a person that understands studies very much, but I understand how people work and having people learn something and having it come to them in a way in which it doesn't feel threatening. So almost everything that came from a developer towards a city official or a state official was kind of met with open ears. So when the coastal standards came to the office of the governor and then to the city about that it was a good idea to be protecting the coastline, I started thinking, what does that mean? And I would not see the extent of it until I started seeing all the different type of social action that's taking place in La Paz and Los Cabos. The #1 stopper for the mines thus there has been the Committee of Academia. That Rafael Rosmena is there, and different folks that were part of understanding these coastal standards. And they started here. And they were welcome. They could have been welcomed by anyone else, but they were welcome because they were non-threatening, and they were useful and on target. And they started a long time ago. And we're going on our 7th year of stopping a major mine in La Paz and in Los Cabos. And there's a lot of work being done there, but going to the right time with the right information to the people that are willing to hear makes a true difference. And it started here. So you should be very proud of where your 1% went in many different directions. And finally, and this is one that I think we'll all care about, of last year, April 22nd of 2013, the federal government passed finally a law in order to limit the amount of plastic that goes into any municipal dump in Mexico. And soon they will pass legislation of how to be able to do that in each part of each county. And I think we'll be ahead of the game. And we'll be ahead of the game because you cared and other people cared as well. And it's now become trendy to recycle. And it's not just in Laredo Bay. The designs of Laredo Bay were duplicated in San Carlos. They were duplicated in Lopez Mateos, where the Grillos come to. And a lot of people are also paying attention in La Paz. And they're paying attention because they heard that folks somewhere in Loreto were willing to do this for some weird reason, even starting in their house with 3 little bags. And it catched on, and it catched on very quickly. So it is important for you to know how trendy it is for information to come in the right direction at the right time for people to listen, and especially in Mexico. So thanks so much.
This place, is not perfect. The vision even may not have been perfect, and the implementation of the vision was certainly not perfect. But you are an example, right? This is a positive example of doing tourism different. It is visually different. It includes elements of both aesthetics and energy and other things that are different. And just experimenting with doing something differently, improving the people who are willing to buy it and live here and enjoy it, that's getting us somewhere in the right direction on my getting tourism and travel into the lane of sustainability. So, yeah.
I'm new here, and what drew me here is magic and heart and caring and dream. And so this is very confirming, because to me, there's nothing more powerful.
And I came to Baja California the first time, and I drove, and I stopped in this place and that place and that place, and this is the place that I stopped. And that's why.
Back to get garbage. Another thing about Ocean Foundation, and I'm wondering if you are, looking at this, is I think we have noticed in Loreto that we now have huge cruise ships that come in. We never had them before. We had very small lines, and now they're coming in to Loreto because of, I don't know, rumor has it because there's problems on the mainland. They've decided it's safer here. But for whatever reason, they're coming. It's wonderful for the community in many ways in terms of the economics of the locals and the local businesses that are all local in Loreto and not, American owned for the most part. But I'm worried about the fact that cruise ships do a lot of dumping in the sea. And, Hawaii is a good example of what is washed up on the shores there. Is there anything that the Ocean Foundation can do, is doing about that, so that we don't all of a sudden start seeing a bunch of trash on our beaches, because every week we have these 2 or 3 big cruise ships that are close in?
So we worked extensively on the cruise ship tourism in Alaska to get at exactly these issues. And it was easier in Alaska than just about anywhere because the ships were in state waters at all times. So all you had to do was get the state to regulate it, and there was no escape for them, right? Here, we're gonna have to get, the Mexican federal government's cooperation. Cruise ship tourism, there's a handful of books on this, and did Overbooked cover? Yeah, Overbooked is a fabulous book on tourism, and also covers cruise ship tourism. It's often not that economically beneficial to communities because of the costs. Here, because you don't have a cruise ship pier and wastewater treatment for the cruise ship while it's in port and things like that, the balance of economic benefit may be mildly in the favor of the community in terms of tax revenue, and in the case of restaurants and some kinds of businesses. But if you walk around today and start asking business by business which ones benefited and which ones didn't, it's not even. And cruise ship tourists, for example, in Portland, Maine, spend $7 per person per visit. in the city of Portland, Maine, right? It's not a big revenue generator.
And it costs the city $10.50 per person.
Right. Now, there are international rules regarding cruise ship dumping. They've been embarrassed as all heck over and over again on some of this stuff. Royal Caribbean and a handful of others have made pledges to do onboard recycling, waste management, removal, returning things to places where they can be handled, not dumping them in a place like this where they can't be handled. We are seeing some of the rules regarding ship stack emissions being enforced, and the newest ships have that. So there are things that we've been working on at the international maritime level, but also in the state of Alaska, which has forced the industry to be a better player, a better steward of the environment. But it's not, easy because they're big.
One of the biggest challenges with the cruise ships is that sustainable tourism in cruise ships is something, it's the estimate 25 years behind terrestrial sustainable tourism. That's what we've been talking about all afternoon. I think that one of the problems, you raised two very good concerns. Cecilia and I were talking about this yesterday, where visitors to park are supposed to pay to the marine park are supposed to pay a fee. The cruise ships are at the moment exempt from that. I think that's a revenue stream that really needs to be captured one way or another. The landing fee of 28 pesos per person, it's not clear.
Not terribly nice.
It's not clear how well that's being captured and properly measured to make sure that the town of Loretto gets some of its funding back, because remember, there are costs associated, whether it's with wastewater treatment, because they all fill all the restaurants and then flush. There are costs associated with law enforcement. In some communities where everybody rolls off, gets hammered, and doesn't quite roll back on peacefully. There are a number of issues that come up with cruise tourism, and I'm not trying to paint a nasty picture of everyone who's ever been on a cruise, but there are these issues that come up. And I think that one of the things that I personally fervently hope is that you never get a cruise pier here, because the very fact that somebody has to choose to get into one of those shuttles and be shuttled ashore keeps the numbers smaller. When you're in Juneau, Alaska for the day, the town is 15,000 people, and the average number of cruise tours there between 9 and 6 every day is 15,000 people. And it's overwhelming. And it's just, you really feel it the minute they leave. We felt it the minute they left yesterday.
I mentioned in one of the slides the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. So I'm sitting on that board to look at how, if a resort claims it's sustainable, what accounting standard are they using, right? So I'm sitting on the resort one, and I'm sitting on the cruise ship one. And resorts, green hotels, et cetera, are way ahead. And as Angel just said, cruise ships are 20 years behind in thinking about all of these issues. It's just, it's mind-boggling. But part of it is they've had this whole sort of mentality of avoiding law and the rule of law, right? There is only one cruise ship that flies an American flag. All the rest of them fly some other flag so that they don't have to comply with U.S. labor law. They look, rather than looking for solving problems, they look for ways to go around.
What's new?
So it's been an hour, and I understand that we can go have a glass of wine, those who want. And I'm happy to keep answering questions here or walk down there and have a glass of wine and answer questions over a glass of wine.
Thank you.
Good idea.
Thank you.